Good evening. The news gang is here. A government guide on how to quarantine yourself if you're a Chinese national who has just landed from Kenya and is already going viral. Party after party and the final capital surrender. Mike Gideon, Kyoko Mbuvi, Sonko and other City Hall stories. Also on the show tonight, a mountain to climb. BBI finally goes to central Kenya. And if you think it's a waste of time, don't waste your time going there. Just ask Kiraitu Murungi. We'll also have the kicker, the punchline, the take, and the angle. The memo tonight is that Jamila is away on a short break. She should be back here next week. Let's get this started. Ladies and gentlemen, Yvonne, you're alone today.
Yep.
In some respect. Self-quarantine for 14 days. That is what the prescription, what the doctor in Kenya has prescribed for Chinese nationals landing here in Kenya. Indeed, and the attempts we have seen today to distinguish between quarantine and isolation. You know, the medical terms that are there. This is what I found interesting from that press briefing, because I was right here when it was being done. One, that the CAS Rashid Aman mentioned about the airline, the Southern China Airlines, and he said that the decision for them to suspend the flights for 2 weeks was not in fact a government decision, but was the airline's own voluntary decision. And I find that interesting in a country where it almost seems like the Kenya government isn't doing much. And he said this was their decision, and they said it was a self-imposed suspension for 2 weeks, after which they resumed their flights yesterday. Self-imposed, self-quarantine is being left to everybody else. And in fact, even the press briefing today was after a lot of outrage, after a lot of anxiety. To be quite honest, among other things we will get to, the way they've handled the communication in a crisis such as this, where people are anxious, people want information, people want to understand what is going on, they're asking questions about their safety. This comes on the back of that. If you've seen what's happening on social media, everybody wondering what is going on. I think this could have been handled better, you know, just telling Kenyans what is happening and why. But Linas, at a time when countries are taking huge unprecedented decisions, they just closed all the public schools in Japan just to be safe. It's not to say there's a crisis there already. We have seen even in the US, I mean, Donald Trump, for everything that he's been saying, but he's appointed his vice president to basically lead the response towards this thing. And it does, and many other countries are doing equally huge unprecedented things just to deal with this thing that is really been declared by the WHO as a global pandemic. What do you make of what's really going on here? Uganda actually just evacuated some of its people from China.
I think our approach has been pathetically casual as a country, because if you look at how the press conference was approached today, it wasn't the cabinet secretary. It was the CAS.
It was not even the PS.
It was not even the PS. It was the CAS, Chief Administrative Secretary. A position we're still wondering what it actually serves on a daily basis. But luckily, and credit to Dr. Rashid Aman, he sounded very much on top of things and said a lot of right things, except at the point when he said that coronavirus can come from different places. And anywhere, he said from anywhere. So it's not just about the airlines. Now, we had assumed that that's the knowledge that should have informed the government to be more serious in how it's approaching this. But I know we are a country that is more VIP oriented. So much so that if we were Iran today, where the vice president of the republic and the deputy health minister and the deputy health minister coronavirus victims right now, they're infected with coronavirus. If that had happened here, I'm sure would have shut the airspace. Yeah.
Francis,
my worry is one of the principal reasons Kenyans go to the ballot every 5 years is to surrender their control to the government, so to say, in terms of making certain governance decisions. And every Kenyan has a right to ask the government all these questions they are asking. They have every reason to be worried. They have every reason to be concerned. And the government has a responsibility it cannot abdicate, even for a single minute. One, of assuring Kenyans of their safety, internally and externally, And number two, of assuring Kenyans that it is on top of things. So when you say those who are coming in to self-isolate, so is self-quarantine. Are there measures that if, for example, you're going to work in a certain road construction, that there will be some enforcement or some follow-up that you're self-quarantining for those 14 days? What if you went to pigem around yuko, as they say in local slang? So there's a reason for Kenyans to be concerned, and it is like dancing. It is like dancing with death,
and it doesn't serve the interest of anyone, because that just means, I mean, if you heard that there were 239 or so passengers on that flight, and somehow they're at large. I mean, they'll be told self-quarantine for 14 days. I mean, it's so difficult to stay in my house even for a whole day, especially if I wanted to go to some place. I'll still go unless I chose to stay at home. But for me to imagine that I want to go, but I can't go, and I'm all by myself, there's no one holding a gun to me, it is very difficult to imagine. And so what will happen is that there'll be fear around, that if you see anyone, you'll be thinking, could this Chinese national be one of those guys who are there? And it doesn't help. I mean, it just means that people will live in this country fearing even to see someone who looks like they came from China, even if they really have nothing to do with it. So it does not help the Kenyans, but even the Chinese nationals who are legitimately here, who are doing genuine business, who are in the construction industry, all of these things, it does not even help them either.
And his answers on that were not conclusive and were not satisfying. I remember he was asked a question not once, but twice or thrice, including a local journalist and one from and one from CNN as well. I mean, the issue of self-quarantine, and this is what he was asked, how do you enforce that? Of all of these 239 individuals, because he says when you're self-quarantined, you are in your house, you do not mix with any other member of your family. Now, you know, imagine the sort of situations we live in. We have shared facilities even within that house. And he was asked, so how do you make
children,
sure?
I mean, a 5-year-old will just run.
Right.
I mean, how they know
so
that?
How do you make sure?
I'm on self-quarantine.
Are they calling them? And he said, you know, we call them, and he said, we may visit those homes. But you see, there was nothing conclusive to say that this is what it is. And you were talking about the response of Kenya compared to other countries. Now we have an isolation facility at KNH, which has a bed capacity of only 11. And then we have the other one at Mbagathi District Hospital, which has a capacity of 120. And they say it's not even ready yet. It'll be up and running in about a month's time. Now, in case anything happens between now and the next 30 days, and that is going by the country and believing that in the next 30 days it truly will be up and running, that is one thing. If we take a look at even the decision to suspend KQ flights to China, we delayed when British Airways and a number of other airlines already made the decision very quickly to be able to do this.
They didn't wait when you self-imposed anything.
Exactly. And at the time, the US, I remember when the outbreak had just began, the US evacuated its citizens. In fact, today, Kuwait, was it today or yesterday, Kuwait sent a plane you know, to Italy to get its residents out, which is the country where there's concern.
By the way, turned back an Italian plane that was bringing in tourists. They said, if you come, you have to be quarantined for 15 days. And these are people who are coming for leisure and all this. So they said, no, we can't do 15 days. So they actually went back, and that's how.
Yeah, and Joe, there was one more absurdity in that statement by the government, and the CAS said that stopping the Chinese from traveling to Kenya would be discriminatory. I think it misses the point. It misses the point completely, because here is the World Health Organization, WHO, warning of the potential of this turning into a pandemic, and you are addressing a completely different issue of race and discrimination. It doesn't arise at all. Those were not the grounds of limiting or controlling travel. But one more thing that really, as Kenyans, we are glad is we're still at the stage of what if. Because if this thing moves to when, then we are in big trouble.
Absolutely.
If you just need to look at our previous examples, we've had simple things like cholera, we've had things like malaria in Baringo, and now we have locusts. I think our hands are full, and for locusts, by the way, we are waiting for them to age. I don't know how it works with coronavirus, if that is the approach.
No, to age on the one hand and to hatch on the other.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yes, that's right.
You know, the key word here should be caution.
Yeah.
You'd rather be sure and slow
Safe than sorry.
and safe than sorry. So if the government is not taking it very seriously, so to say, then something is amiss and something is totally wrong. But what is important, and I don't know whether you guys watched the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs before the Parliamentary Committee.
Right.
Members of Parliament were not convinced. And those are the people's representatives. If you cannot be able to convince that small group of members of Parliament as a CS, then there's a problem, because you have an obligation to convince every Kenyan that they are safe. So if your answers are not satisfactory, if there's still anxiety, then something is wrong.
And you remember what she said? She said, I don't know what other language to use, to explain it to you, because I think at that point there was quite a bit of frustration around the issue. The MPs were having none of it, and she was just not able to communicate, I think, to the satisfaction
but the entire communication
of the MPs.
thing has been a big problem. I mean, all the way from China with Sarah Serem, and here, today even the issue of Sarah Serem came up. Actually, one of the MPs said she was speaking more like a pastor than an ambassador. And that is something we raised on the show last week. And just looking at how, even the level of communication. This thing is so serious that we should have been seeing something as high as the presidency, for example, addressing itself to this and assuring the country, because this is something that has the potential of basically shutting down the country. We've seen, for example, if you go to downtown Nairobi, a lot of those people who get their goods from China, they're already feeling the heat. If you look at the tourism industry, it's already taking a hit. So if something were to happen that we start hearing about cases in Kenya, then even the tourism industry that has been recovering, the economy already is doing so badly. So if you have a situation where now people start avoiding Kenya, goods can no longer come and that sort of thing, you're basically looking at a very worrying situation.
I'm really hoping that the cabinet secretary designate of health, Mutahi Kagwe, can be sworn in as quickly as possible, probably take charge of this process, and even the cabinet maybe take charge and deal with it, because I'm yet to hear the cabinet sitting as a proper sitting to discuss this matter, which I thought should have been done by now, so that some tangible things can be seen to be done. Something is amiss, let me put it that way.
In the US, Francis, what has happened right now is President Trump has appointed
Mike Pence.
is vice president to lead the response, and all the communication has to be approved by Mike Pence's office. Now, we don't have a clear structure around here right now on how we actually intend to respond, especially if this coronavirus lands in Kenya.
Let's pray.
Okay.
Well,
right now we need to move.
And hope.
Maybe we can take the break and we can all say a prayer and then return when we take a look at more topics here. We're calling this the Surrender Edition. You will find out why in just a moment.